College basketball gives us one of those slates where every matchup feels like its own little puzzle, and on a day like this, the edges come from understanding tempo, efficiency, and who can actually execute when the game slows down. Welcome back to Beyond the Box Score, where every breakdown is about clarity, context, and carving out the smartest angle on the board. Today's games bring a mix of strange locations, mismatched styles, and teams moving in completely opposite directions, so the goal is to take all the raw data and turn it into confident, well-reasoned picks. Let's dive straight into it because this slate has real value hidden beneath the surface. The first game brings us one of the oddest matchups on the schedule, not because of the teams themselves, but because of where the game is being played. South Dakota State is traveling into Muncie, Indiana to face Ball State, and the setting alone makes this feel like a neutral environment more than a true home court. Both teams play at a slower pace, but the fundamental gap here is shot making. South Dakota State can actually put the ball in the basket, while Ball State simply cannot. That difference matters even more in slow games where each possession carries extra weight. The Jackrabbits come in at 5-5, fresh off a 3-point loss at home to Idaho, and while that result doesn't jump off the page, the underlying numbers do. They play at a bottom 100 pace but still shoot 45% from the field, and they're a top 90 rebounding team, which means they can control the glass even in low possession environments. Statistically, they win just about every major category except turnovers, where they average 2 more giveaways per game than Ball State. Even with that flaw, they still grade out with a top 75 defense, which further strengthens the case that they can dictate this matchup. Ball State is trending in the opposite direction at 3-6, also playing slow with a bottom 60 pace. Their issue is pure offensive incapability, shooting only 40% from the field. Just 11 days ago, they put up one of the most alarming performances of the season in a 55-37 loss to Lafayette. Scoring 37 points in a 40-minute game against another mid-major opponent says everything about their current offensive identity. There isn't one. They're bottom 25 in rebounds per game and bottom 60 in assists per game, which perfectly aligns with their playstyle of heavy isolation. That might hold up in the MAC when matchups are familiar and talent gaps are narrower, but it is not going to translate against a disciplined, well-structured South Dakota State group. On top of everything, Ball State has no meaningful home court edge, the building rarely fills, and the energy tends to be flat. South Dakota State travels well and handles environments like this with poise. With the more reliable offense, the rebounding advantage, the established defensive metrics, and the proven track record of consistency, the pick remains South Dakota State -6.5. Next up, we shift to a Big Ten matchup where pace might be misleading, but efficiency absolutely will not be. Illinois travels into Columbus to take on Ohio State, and this game profiles as one where both offenses are simply too polished to hold under the number. Illinois is laying roughly 3.5 points, which suggests a competitive finish and late-game free throws, always an important factor when targeting an over. The play is the over 157.5 because both teams have elite scoring profiles paired with defenses that are not at the same level as their offensive units. Illinois enters at 7-2, coming off a 13-point win in Nashville over Tennessee, which for all practical purposes functioned as a road win. They average 89 points per game while playing at a bottom 150 pace, which tells us that efficiency, not speed, drives their scoring output. They shoot 48% from the field and knock down 10 threes per game, which adds volatility to the upside in a game like this. Illinois' roster construction also matters. When they faced UConn earlier in the season, the storyline was simple: they're long, they're athletic, and many of their players stretch the floor like modern European wings. They rebound exceptionally well for a shooting team, pulling down 13 offensive boards per game. That strength becomes even more relevant against an Ohio State team that has struggled on the glass against power conference opponents. Ohio State comes in at 7-1, though they should realistically be 8-0 if not for a half-court buzzer-beater loss to Pitt. They score 88 points per game and shoot an absurd 53% from the field, which ranks 4th in the country. Their last win was an 86-82 victory at Northwestern where they shot just 29% from deep and still cleared 80 with room to spare. They're an older team, more experienced, and they'll have a genuinely strong home crowd because football is on an extended break. Add in the fact that Illinois is ranked, and this building will be humming from the opening tip. Both teams can hit high percentage shots, both can score through contact, both can respond when the other side gets hot, and the competitive nature of the line gives late-game scoring an extra push. Everything here points toward offense, so the over 157.5 remains the best angle. For the next matchup, Penn State heads to Indiana, and this one is all about timing and trajectory. The advice here is straightforward. If you want Penn State, wait, because the line keeps climbing. It opened at -12 for Indiana, jumped immediately to 14.5, and it wouldn't be surprising at all if it closed at 17.5 or even 18.5. Indiana is in the ultimate get-right position after dropping 2 straight, and Penn State is walking into its first true road game of the season without the resume to justify trust. Penn State is 8-1, but their record is inflated by a schedule filled almost entirely with home-bye games against mid-major opponents. They've played only one real Power 4 opponent, Providence, and lost by 12. They average only 7 made threes per game, play at a bottom 75 pace, and sit bottom 150 in assists per game, which is not ideal against a stronger, more physical opponent. Their defense is ranked 183rd despite facing no high-level teams, which should raise red flags going into a hostile environment. Indiana stands at 7-2, though the losses, Minnesota by 9 on the road and Louisville by 9 on what was likely a neutral court, don't overshadow their upside. Their best wins include Marquette by 23 and Kansas State by 17. Neither of those opponents is elite, but both are better than Penn State, and both wins demonstrate Indiana's ability to dominate when they have a personnel advantage. With the home crowd behind them, a coaching staff that knows how to stabilize their group after losing streaks, and motivation to reassert themselves, this is the type of matchup where Indiana should be able to pull away and win by 20 or more. The spot, the environment, and the matchup all align, so the pick is Indiana at home. Finally, we move to an Ivy League versus America East matchup that does not show up on many national radars but offers a clear betting direction. Columbia travels to Stony Brook, and while Ivy teams don't often attract betting interest, this is a rare spot where the edge is strong enough to justify backing them. Columbia enters at 9-1 with their only loss coming on the road at UConn by 27, which is a completely respectable result given the caliber of opponent. They've covered this number in every one of their 9 wins except for a 2-point victory over Hofstra at home. They average 82 points per game, play at a bottom 125 pace, and shoot 50% from the field, making them one of the most efficient mid-major offenses in the country. Their size also stands out. They grab 39 rebounds per game, good enough to rank inside the top 50 nationally. This is a team built with real structure, real balance, and real physicality. Stony Brook, meanwhile, has not shown anything this season that suggests they can slow Columbia down. They're coming off a 9-point road loss to Duquesne, and based on personnel alone, Columbia would handle Duquesne comfortably. Stony Brook has not played meaningful competition, and their weaknesses should be exposed against a team that moves the ball well, rebounds with force, and scores with efficiency. With Colombia's size, shooting, and overall execution advantage, the line of -7.5 is justified. The Lions should be able to apply pressure possession after possession, wear Stony Brook down physically, and eventually create the separation needed to cover. The pick is Colombia -7.5 on the road because the gap in discipline, efficiency, and reliability is simply too large. Normally when someone brings up an Ivy League basketball program, you picture a fundamentally sound team full of academically minded players, maybe a roster with a couple of smart shooters and a deliberate style. But this Colombia team doesn't fit that stereotype at all. Physically, they look more like a high major roster than a traditional Ivy group. They're enormous across the board. They've got 3 players listed at over 6'8", and even their small forward stands at 6'8". Their power forward and center stretch past 6'10", and they roll out a shooting guard at 6'5" with a point guard at 6'3". That kind of size creates an identity by itself, and most teams at this level simply struggle to match up with that length and strength in the frontcourt. When you watch them, you immediately see the difference. They occupy space, rebound in traffic, and turn simple post entries into efficient looks because defenders just can't move them off their spots. Stony Brook enters this matchup at 6-3 with losses to Yale by 7, Pacific by 26, and most recently to Duquesne by 9. They put up just 74 points per game and shoot 43% from the field, but their biggest issue is their size, or really, the lack of it. They start 3 underclassmen and simply do not have anyone who can consistently compete with Colombia's interior presence. They're significantly smaller across every position group, and that matters in a matchup where the physical gap is this wide. With the rebounding disadvantage, the lack of interior length, and no real leverage to force turnovers, it's hard to see how Stony Brook prevents Colombia from getting whatever they want down low. The Lions should be able to control the paint from start to finish, and that leads me to the side. I'm taking Colombia on the road at -4.5 because the matchup advantages are too clear, and the frontcourt difference is too overwhelming to ignore. Now moving on, we hit the only game on this slate where the line has not yet posted, which makes sense given the nature of the matchup, the MEAC taking on the Coastal Athletic. I'm backing North Carolina A&T here on the spread, whatever it opens as. I expect it to be something around a pick'em, and to me, the highest number I'd feel comfortable laying would be 3.5 or 4.5. Ideally, this comes out somewhere around -1.5 because that would create strong value. Howard is serviceable, but 3 of their wins came against Division II opponents, and that absolutely impacts how their metrics appear on paper. What makes this game even more interesting is the venue, Cameron Indoor Stadium. The game taking place there without a clear reason creates one of the most random environments you'll see all season. I tried to find an explanation for it and couldn't, so we roll with the mystery. Howard sits at 5-5, but if you remove the D2 matchups, they're actually 2-5. Their 2 wins came at home against Niagara by 10, and Niagara is awful, and Alcorn State by 8, a bottom-tier SWAC team. Whenever Howard travels or meets a semi-competent opponent, they take a loss. They average 78 points per game on 46% shooting, but again, those numbers are inflated because of the D2 games. Remove those matchups, and realistically, Howard is closer to 73 points per game and around 42% shooting. That's a significant drop and reflects what they actually look like when tested. North Carolina A&T is 4-3 with just 1 Division II win. Their 3 other victories are all legitimate, coming against Morgan State, South Carolina State, and NC Central. Those programs are comparable in quality to Howard, and A&T handled them fine. They average 75 points per game, play at a top 125 pace, and shoot 46% from the field. Statistically, They match up closely with Howard, but the difference is who they've played. A&T has faced the tougher strength of schedule, and that matters. Add in the geographic edge. A&T is from Carolina, Howard is from the DC area, and despite being in a strange venue, this has the feel of a home-leaning environment for A&T. With that in mind, I'm backing North Carolina A&T on the spread. Next, we go to one of the biggest mismatches on the slate, Maryland Eastern Shore on the road at Virginia. I'm laying this number without hesitation. This line is too small, and realistically, it should be closer to 50. Maryland Eastern Shore has historically been one of the weakest programs in Division I, and this year is no exception. They're 4-8, with 2 of those wins coming against D2 schools and the other 2 coming against Binghamton and Longwood. And how they managed to beat Longwood on the road is a mystery because the rest of their resume is a disaster. In their by-game matchups against legitimate opponents, it's been ugly. They lost to Georgia 94-29, Creighton 84-45, and Nebraska 69-50. And honestly, that Nebraska result is the outlier. Georgia and Creighton set the standard for the type of margin this team should be losing by when stepping up in class. This is their 3rd straight road game, and they score just 62 points per contest, play at the 7th slowest pace in the entire country, and yet somehow still turn the ball over 16 times per game. That combination, slow tempo, high turnover rate, is a recipe for blowouts, because they simply cannot generate enough possessions to offset their mistakes. Virginia is 8-1 coming off a 13-point neutral site win over Dayton. They score 87 points a game, shoot 49% from the field, knock down 11 threes per game, and rank top 30 nationally in rebounding. They win every meaningful statistical category in this matchup by a landslide. They're back at home, and the atmosphere should be lively given the time they've spent away. I'm taking Virginia at -35.5, and I'd play it all the way to 43 or 44. This has the feel of the Kansas State-type blowout we saw earlier this season. Now for the final official play, and it's my favorite bet of the night. I'm taking Bucknell on the road at Rider at -1.5. This is easily one of the worst matchups on the board, but sometimes the ugliest games produce the clearest value. Together, these teams are 3-16 on the season. Rider still does not have a Division I win, and Bucknell is riding a 9-game losing streak. But the important detail is that most of Bucknell's losses have been competitive. They opened the year 2-0 and have dropped every game since, but the margins haven't been blowouts. They lost by 6 on the road to Hofstra, by 5 on the road at Bowling Green, by 2 at home to Buffalo, and by 7 at home to UMBC. They're not getting destroyed, they're staying within range. They also bring real size. Their frontcourt features 2 players at 6'10" and 6'11", and their starting lineup includes 3 Europeans alongside 2 guards from the Bronx. It's an unusual roster construction for a Patriot League team, but the size is legitimate. If they can shoot it even moderately well tonight, this is the perfect spot to end the losing streak. Rider is 1-7 with their only victory coming against a Division II opponent. They've lost to Coppin State and Merrimack, both bottom 20 programs nationally. They shoot just 37% from the field, 27% from deep, and turn it over 15 times per game. And with no real crowd expected in what will be a near-silent gym, Bucknell should have every opportunity to dictate the matchup. I'm taking Bucknell -1.5, and I think they win this by double digits. To close things out, let's talk through the almost plays, starting with Clemson versus BYU. It looks like this is at a neutral site, possibly Madison Square Garden, but either way, I'm on Clemson +5.5. BYU hasn't impressed me much this season, and Clemson has shown enough to stay within that number. Then we move to Florida vs UConn, another neutral site matchup. I'm taking Florida plus 4.5. They're overdue for a win against a Power 4 opponent, while UConn already has their Power 4 victories and can afford a step back here. Florida needs this one, and it feels like the right moment for them. Xavier Lee has been inconsistent, but if he can step up and deliver even one strong performance, that's the key. And lastly, the Colorado State game. The early number listed was 24.5, but the correct line is Colorado State minus 19.5, and that is a bet for me. They're coming off that Colorado matchup, and Dartmouth traveling all the way out there during Ivy League Finals week makes no sense. Motivation is unlikely to be high on Dartmouth's side, and the spot heavily favors Colorado State. So I'm backing them at minus 19.5. And that wraps up the full slate breakdown. As always, I appreciate you taking the time to tune in and dive deep into these matchups. If you want more expert-level analysis, sharper breakdowns, and daily prediction videos just like this, make sure you're locked in here on Beyond the Box Score. I'll see you in the next one.